and questions are really what matters. So when you're thinking about your business, I want you to take a very specific process as it is related to looking up information, asking people to give you numbers and data. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Physician Growth Accelerator, a show where we break down your medical practice vitals into systems, give you the tools to diagnose root cause of what may be restricting your growth, and most importantly, prescribe what to do about it. I'm your host, Zed Williamson, and I believe that every system is perfectly designed to get the result it gets. And the value in that belief is that whatever outcome you're experiencing, just know that it's the perfect outcome. If you don't like it, all we have to do is tweak the system. But how did we get here? Did we just start a show just to throw random details out into the world about running medical practices? No. Over the last 13 years, we've worked with well over 500 private medical practices. And when you get that understanding, you witness things where you see similarities, with struggle, with success. And when you have this understanding of systems, you realize that all we need to do is change some inputs in a system to drive a different outcome. And so we started asking questions. And those questions over the years helped us build an understanding of where there's opportunity to improve the process within a private medical practice. We'll always assume that clinically a practice is doing the best they absolutely can. But the other side of a medical practice is the business side. And if you don't have a healthy business, you're not going to be able to treat patients. So that's the purpose. And today, we're going to talk about something that it may sound boring at first, but I promise it's not, and that is data. Data is just information, but the problem is when we're running a business, you're going head forward, full speed, and you're doing all the daily things, and then one day you go, I wonder this, and maybe you toss it to an employee and you say, hey, can you find out this information? And it throws that person off, and they go down a rabbit hole and try to get it to you, and by the time it gets to you, maybe it doesn't mean anything, or it didn't really tell you what you're looking for, and so you ask for more information. And the thing is, sometimes we don't ask the questions to help us understand what we're trying to figure out. So you're in business, you witness something that you don't like. Maybe it's related to financial performance. Maybe it's related to patient experience, treatment, whatever it is. And so you start thinking, hey, go look this up. Go get me this information. And then sometimes it's hard to get the information. And then sometimes it was a waste of time because there was nothing really to do with that information. To kind of correlate with a medical practice, imagine if a patient came in and they said, Doc, I am in extreme pain. I stubbed my toe. I thought I was kicking a football. I was kicking a brick wall. And imagine if you just go, okay, let's check your temperature. No, your temperature's fine, so no, it must be all in your head. There's no issue. The person would think you were insane, right? Because they stated a problem and you measured something that's unrelated and then gave them feedback. But sometimes we do that in business where we jump at this request for information where we go, hey, let's look at this because it's going to be really important. And we send people down rabbit holes. Now, does that mean looking at data is a bad idea? Absolutely not. We should. And let's follow a process. When a patient comes in and they show you some symptoms or they explain what they're dealing with, that gives you an idea of what kind of questions you're going to ask. And questions are really what matters. So when you're thinking about your business, I want you to take a very specific process as it is related to looking up information, asking people to give you numbers and data. So first, what we want to do is we want to create a problem statement. So instead of asking a question first, state the problem that you're experiencing. And let's say I'm just going to make something up. I don't know if the time I spend talking with referring physicians is worth it. So that's a nice problem statement, right? It's straightforward, it's specific, and now it poses a thing that is a problem, hence problem statement. Real brilliant there, Zed. But it gives you an idea of what really is important, okay? So now that you've stated this problem, what we want to identify is what is the data source that's going to help us uncover what the answer is to this problem. So maybe it would be number of patients from referral. Maybe it's number of patients by referral by week for the last 6 months. Maybe it's the type of patients. Maybe it's CPT codes related to the patients that are referred to you. Maybe it's the time you spend speaking with potential referral partners. So think about the data inputs that would help you with this problem statement. And then what you're going to want to decide before you actually look into the data, ask yourself, what decision does this support? And your employees are going to love you for doing this, because sometimes you'll get curious or frustrated and you'll send people down a path to get all this information, but in reality, you weren't going to make a decision anyway. And so why are we wasting the time? So simply ask yourself, what decision is this going to support? And then write that down. So let's say in this case of I'm not sure if the time I spend with potential referring physicians is worth it. And so maybe your decision is I'm not going to spend any more time trying to get referrals. Right? That's a decision. And so you see how we're creating a system. We're creating almost a treatment algorithm for your desire for data, right? Problem statement, where is the data coming from? And then what decision is this going to support? So now, the next important part is ask yourself, what are the consequences of this decision? You see how now we're putting the leverage of importance. Because imagine if there was 0 consequences. So now you're thinking, well, why would I spend, hours getting employees to dig into information if there is no consequence? If there is consequence, now it gives you even more leverage as to why we need to achieve this understanding. So what is the consequence of this decision? Maybe it is if I make the wrong decision and we lose 20% of our patient volume. That's pretty significant, right? Then, how does this data impact the decision? So if you have the time spent, right? So now we're going back to the data. The time you spent, if we have the number of patients, if we have maybe CPT codes related to that patient, the type of patient, maybe even the reimbursement revenue related to those referred patients, now it's starting to paint a picture, and you would say it would affect my decision because I will use that to determine value of my time, of how it's best spent. So do you see how we're creating a process for you to dig into the important things of your practice? And the reason why this is so helpful for your employees is because your employees want to help you. They're part of your team. And sometimes, I know I've done it, I'll throw out a question and go, hey, I'm wondering about this. And everyone runs off. Oh, we got to get this information for Zed because it's really important for him to know this information. Then they spend time, they bring back the information, I look at it, and if I didn't go through this process, there's likely some scenarios where it really wasn't affecting a decision. The decision didn't have much consequence. The information wasn't right to help me with the actual decision that mattered because I didn't state a clear problem statement. So the value of doing this, and this comes from me making a lot of mistakes and me having people go down rabbit holes that was a waste of their time, which ended up wasting the organization's time. And this comes from, I'm going to show you something that might be a little overwhelming. When we do a diagnostic with a practice to kind of understand what's going on, there's about 160 questions that we go through. That doesn't mean we sit you on a stand and ask you 160 questions. But these are the things that we have learned over time, the distilled down things that if we understand the answers to this, it gives you complete understanding of where the practice is and what needs to be tweaked. But this came from a process of problem statements, data, what decision is it going to affect, and what are the consequences of that decision. Because in the beginning, we were asking the questions that didn't really help us. And all it did was get you back to another question. So if you think back to that patient I talked about that, kicked a brick wall, they might need some other help if they're going around kicking brick walls. And if you just take their temperature and tell them it's okay, I know that seems ridiculous, but that sometimes is how we treat our business. Go get this piece of information. Oh, okay, here it is. And we really didn't set ourselves up for success because there was no clear problem statement. There was no clear identification of the data needed. There was no clear identification of what decision is this going to support and what are the consequences of this decision. And so if you want, you can write those things down because this is a very helpful process. Problem statement. And it's a statement because we want to say there is a problem. Because if we can't say there is a problem, why are we asking people to look up things? Data source. What kind of things are we pulling from to get an idea about this information? What decision is this going to support? Kind of call out in the future. I'm going to decide A or B. I'm going to decide whether or not I'm going to decide, because if we just say, well, I'm just curious, and I love curiosity. I'm probably one of the more curious people you'll ever meet, which also sends me down some rabbit holes. But if we're asking people to get data for us, it shouldn't be based on curiosity. It should be based on a problem statement. And we should be able to identify the consequence of the decision that we're going to make based on that information. So I hope that was helpful for you. If you ever want to check your medical practice vitals, you can go to physiciangrowthaccelerator.com, click on My Vitals. Thanks, and we'll see you again on the Physician Growth Accelerator.